Just want to have a little bit more of a closer look at pace calculators and recognizing just how fast you should be running each run at, because you shouldn't be running every run at the same pace or the same speed or the same heart rate. Every run should feel pretty different. This Luke Humphrey pace calculator is pretty much the best one I've found online. I'll leave a link in the description. So let's just have a quick look at it. If we just select the race, we'll select marathon. I work in kilometers simply because the first app I ever used was in kilometers, and I've just stuck with it for no other reason than that. And so in the time section, so if we've got marathon, let's put in, I think the average time for a male runner is about 4 hours 15 minutes for the marathon. You can also put in stuff like temperature, and that's obviously quite hard to gauge, sort of 4 or 5 months out, so we'll leave that. And then just calculate paces. It gives me the time of the event, 4 hours 15 minutes. So the pace, you need to run that in miles, which is 9:44, and then pace, you need to run that in kilometers, which is 6:03. Then it just gives you a nice little breakdown of what you should be running each of your training runs at. So, and this is something I talk about quite a lot in the videos. It's easy runs, steady runs, tempo runs. Everyone's kind of got their own jargon as well, which kind of makes it a bit more confusing, especially at the start. I'll just go through these just to give you how I would perceive these efforts to be. Easy, very comfortable pace. You can see here between 6:59 and 7:36. The reason there's quite a big a window there, it just should feel very easy, and it really doesn't matter, especially doing your easy runs, and I'd even say your steady runs. Pace doesn't really matter on these ones. It's just about getting the mileage in your legs, and you want to try and do that with as less sort of effort as possible and conserving as much energy as possible. Certainly these days when I'm doing a steady run or an easy run, I really just mentally, I'm just taking it very easy. If I'm training, if I've got my heart rate monitor on, it will be below 140, should be quite below that, 130, 135, just so that I can do the miles on my training plan, for instance, but I'm not really feel like I'm putting like a huge effort, and then saving energy for when I do have a tempo run or a harder run, which will draw much more energy. So yeah, moderate run, again, these are all kilometers. I'll just list the times in kilometers. So it's between 6:40 and 7:18. Again, moderate or steady, I would call that steady pace. You'll be doing lots of your marathon training runs at this pace. I've really, certainly in the last couple of years, I've really benefited from just doing these, not creeping up into the top end of these brackets, still keeping it quite slow, because if you think about it, it's just about getting the distance in your legs. It doesn't really matter. You're not trying to run them at any pace. You're just trying to, these are much more of your endurance building runs. So I'm not bothered about the pace as long as I keep my heart rate low and it just feels super comfortable. Then that's what I'm aiming for on these runs. Long runs, again, there's a big window, and again, it just kind of depends what you want to do with the long runs. Your marathon long training runs, again, should be at steady pace. You shouldn't be running at marathon paces. I found it very helpful to introduce some marathon paced efforts during these long runs, but say like 20 minutes of every hour at marathon pace, and then go back to a steady pace, just to get you really tuned into how that feels. In general, especially if this is your first training cycle, marathon training cycle, second marathon training cycle, just keep those long runs steady away. Then we get to the speed workouts. These are traditionally shorter runs, but you're really looking to increase the pace. So that speed workout is between 5:19 and 5:33. And these can be either track sessions or a fartlek, which is essentially just sprinting from one object to another. So there can be lampposts. It doesn't have to be anything. You don't have to go to a track to do it. Literally 100 meters down the road, just sprint and recover. Just pick something else, sprint to that, just to get your heart rate elevated and to start to add some sort of speed and fitness work to your steady runs. For something like a Vo2 Max workout, Vo2 Max is the maximum amount of oxygen the body can utilize during a run or during exercise. essentially the faster your body can process oxygen, the faster you potentially will be able to run. Again, for an amateur, it's a metric, it's an input. It's not the whole picture by all means. Without sort of getting into it too much, say you've got a Garmin, for example, or a sport watch, it will give you a Vo2 Max reading on there based on your runs that you're inputting. But I think without really going to a lab and getting fully tested and fully analysed, it's a ballpark number that they're kind of pulling out the air. So it's an interesting thing. It's certainly nothing to get fixated on, and yeah, as I say, it's one input but not the whole thing. Lactate threshold is a similar type of thing where it's essentially the upper limit of your sustainable effort in training and competition. So something like this, a lactate threshold effort, I mean, Vo2 Max, if you were thinking it in race terms, that would be like a 5k smasheroo. How fast can you run a 5k in? And then lactate threshold is how fast can you run before your blood lactate gets too much and it forces you to slow down or even stop. And if you really run out of, that's when you run out of glycogen and hit the wall, which are other things that we'll come on to. So let's say your training program says 14 kilometers, 8 steady, 6 at lactate threshold. So you can see that's quite a jump. So if we go from 6:59 or say 6:40, which is the upper part of the of a moderate run, down to 5:33, which is, yeah, that's obviously a big, you know, it's over a minute and a half difference. Again, just gets you tuned into running at that speed, and your legs, you've done something, your legs aren't fresh. It's nice to do these progression sessions where you kind of go through the gears in a way. You warm up, you start easy, then you go to steady, and then you can do, say, like the last 5-6k at a good lick, a sort of lactate threshold. But the other good thing about this this calculator is equivalent race performances. So 10k, so if you've done a 55 minute 10k, then that kind of puts you on course to be able to do a 4-hour 15 marathon. If you've done a, say, 60-minute 10k and you were absolutely gunning it, you could get no more out of the session, then can you replicate that 4 and a bit more times? Probably not. The equivalent race performance for half marathon is 2:02:18. So can you actually run, can you do a 2:02 marathon? Is that your best performance? Could you flip that over and do it again? These are just honest questions to ask yourself before you start. So check this out, Luke Humphrey running. I'll leave a link in the description. And yeah, lots of good info.